Good evening. I would like to call the Board of Education budget hearing meeting of June 16, 2015 to order. Mrs. Camworth, do the roll call, please.
Mrs. Gleason? Here. Mr. Johnson?
Here.
Mrs. Jones? Here. Mrs. Camworth here. Mrs. Ressler? Here. Mrs. Stearns? Here. Mr. Canning?
Here. Let's stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. O'Malley, would you present the budget hearing information, please?
I certainly will. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the public and board members, tonight we're hosting a public hearing for the adoption of the amended 2014-2015 budget. This was necessary because in the Illinois State Board of Education budget form, there is an administrative cost worksheet, and there is a cap on that worksheet, capping administrative increases to 5%. When we adopted the budget back in September, we were under that cap. We were at 4%. However, when the auditors finalized our fiscal 2014 audit, they made some adjustments which reworked some of the figures into this cap, throwing us over the 5% threshold. So we had to make some amendments to the 2014-2015 budget per the State Board of Ed to bring us back down under that 5% threshold. And board members, in your packets is the amended budget summary, which we will be approving later on this evening. If any members of the public have any questions, we would entertain those now.
Okay, at this time, I'd be looking for a motion to open the floor for public comment.
So moved. Second.
So moved by Mrs. Gleason, second by Mrs. Jones. Any public comments? Roll call, sorry.
Mrs. Jones?
Aye.
Mrs. Camworth, aye. Mrs. Ressler?
Aye.
Mrs. Stearns?
Aye.
Mrs. Gleason?
Aye.
Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
Mr. Canning?
Aye. Okay, now, any comments? Comments from the public? No. Okay, there is. Okay, at this time, I'd be looking for a motion to close the floor for public comments.
So moved. Second.
Moved by Mrs. Ressler, second by Mrs. Gleason. Roll call.
Mrs. Ressler?
Aye.
Mrs. Gleason?
Aye.
Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
Mrs. Jones?
Aye.
Mrs. Camworth, aye. Mrs. Stearns?
Aye.
Mr. Canning?
Aye. Okay, adjournment. I'd be looking for a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
Moved by Mrs. Gleason, second by Mrs. Ressler. Roll call.
Mrs. Gleason?
Aye.
Mrs. Ressler?
Aye.
Mr. Johnson? Mrs. Jones?
Aye.
Mrs. Camworth, aye. Ms. Stearns?
Aye.
Mr. Canning?
Aye. Okay, very good. Let's move on to our regular board meeting here. I'd like to call the Board of Education meeting of June 16, 2015 to order. Mrs. Camworth, would you please take roll call?
Mrs. Gleason?
Here.
Mr. Johnson?
Here.
Mrs. Jones?
Here.
Mrs. Camworth here. Mrs. Ressler?
Here.
Ms. Stearns?
Here.
Mr. Canning?
Here. Okay, let's take the pledge. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, at this time, I'd be looking for a motion to approve the open and closed session minutes of the May 12th meeting.
So moved. Second.
Moved by Mrs. Stearns and seconded by Mrs. Ressler. Any discussion on the minutes? No, we don't.
Two corrections from you. In the minutes, it says that I mentioned a student being suspended by Mr. Johnson. Mr. Johnson was not the person who suspended the athlete. And in the closed session meeting, a watermill is spelled incorrectly.
Okay. Duly noted. Anybody else? Discussion? I have an issue on line number 3, where it says that our new board attorney has worked for Bremen Township. That information is inaccurate, and I would like that amended into the notes. Mrs. DeVos.
Thanks.
Is there any other discussion? Okay, roll call.
Mrs. Stearns?
Aye.
Mrs. Ressler?
Aye.
Mrs. Gleason?
No.
Mr. Johnson?
No.
Mrs. Jones?
We're voting on, I'm sorry, the minutes, abstain.
Mrs. Campworth, aye. Mr. Canning?
I'm going to abstain until it's amended. Yeah, we'll bring the minutes forward next month for another vote. Okay. Number 5, communications from the public. Do we have anybody that would like to speak to the board, Mrs. Campbell?
Okay. We have Karen Mosqueda, Dean Woodland, and Joe Baz. All have the same comment. So do you have one person coming to speak for your group?
Actually, two of us. The two of us are going to speak. Dean Woodward.
Sure.
And Mosqueda Woodward.
Okay. And who's going to speak first?
I am.
Okay. You can come up.
I just have a couple questions of clarification for some answers that we were, actually some things that came up at the last meeting. When we were asked about the new attorneys and how he was picked, and everyone was saying that there was no association, with the board, and you just researched and found him. Then when he got up here and started talking, he began pointing out, saying that he was involved in a case with you 2 years ago, and then, or 2 or 3 years ago, and then involved in another case. Isn't that association? So somebody on the board knew who the attorney is. And then it was said that there was no prior, any interaction with him before.
And that's addressed to me.
I'll
answer it for you.
Okay.
I wasn't on board at that time, ma'am, so I couldn't tell you one way or the other as far as.
Okay, but
I
you did-
understand that Mr. Murphy did address the audience and did state that he had represented Mrs. Stearns in some type of a challenge. That's what I recall from that.
Right.
We're a part of it.
But
My
excuse me,
challenge
she
was
said though it was
municipal,
from 2 years ago.
nothing with school.
Okay.
No, she said Mrs. Ressler.
Yes, because you said that you were
Oh, yeah,
involved,
absolutely. Miss Ressler.
also, but then they were saying that there was, no other you didn't know of them, but then,
No, it was stated that he did represent Ms. Resler in a petition challenge. And that was talked about, and I believe.
when he came up to
Yes.
speak,
Yes.
yes. Okay. The other question I do have, when he was talking about the football coach, okay. It was brought up that he was the only one that wanted the job. You were praising him. I don't know you. I'm not trying to
That's
offend
fine.
in any way at all. And nobody wanted the position. Until the principal was asked if anybody else had inquired for that position, then to find out several others had months ago. How would you not know that?
It was not brought to my attention. I found that out, as I stated before. It was approaching the 1st of May, and I had found out that we had still not landed a football coach for our school at Hillcrest. And that was very disturbing to me. that we had let that go that late into the season. Typically, as I stated before, you would like to have your football coach in place around Thanksgiving,
Right,
no later usually than the first of the year.
right. But as president, shouldn't you know, like speaking to the principals of school and
You
making time?
would think I would have known that, but I did not.
Okay, so shouldn't it be then that maybe you should make appointments with the principals to find out exactly what's going on with the school, what's needed to be able to accurately inform the people as to what's going on?
Typically in those type of situations, we do not get involved in employment situations. They're brought to our attention in personnel meeting, and yes, we do go over that, but there was nothing brought to us. Okay.
Okay. The other question I had,
I'm not sure that's quite correct, because
Okay.
I believe they were talking about hiring a PE teacher who was going to take the job.
I'm not aware of that.
I was aware of that after the personnel chair.
That was the case. We spoke about that in open session.
But as of the first week in May, there had been nothing as far as a football coach discussed at
okay.
that time that I was aware of.
Okay, the other question I had is when the attorney got up here, how did he know when he was told he couldn't vote for himself? How did he know how the vote was going to go? He goes, well, you're not going to have an answer tonight because it's going to go 2-2. It was like, how would he even know how it was going to be voted for?
I don't understand the question.
When he came up, when he was asked to come up and speak at the podium about him being able to vote, because it was a vote for
Oh, he was pulled
himself.
out of the audience at that time.
And he came up and he said, no, he can't vote for himself, so, he goes, you're not gonna have an answer tonight because it's gonna be a split vote now. How would he know that? I mean,
Well, it's, again, I would not like to speak for Mr. Murphy, but by law, and I wasn't aware of this until that evening as well, by law, you cannot vote for yourself in those situations.
right, no, but I
Contract
understand, but how did he know that the other votes weren't going to go to have him be put into the position?
That'd be a great question to ask Mr. Murphy.
Is he gonna be here?
I believe he is.
Okay. The other question I had was about the iPads that were being voted in. If you don't have a correct dollar amount of how much people are going to be charged for these items, now, are they iPads or iPad minis?
iPads.
They are iPads?
Are the iPad minis?
They're minis?
Yes.
Okay, because I thought it was voted for the iPads. As a parent, I've had 3 children that have gone through Tinley Park High School, and I'm also now, I'm a grandmother, and I've got grandkids that are in the system. Not in high school, but, starting. When you go to register your children, and it's already a huge amount of money. I had 3 kids in the school at one time, in addition to all their sports and everything they did. How can you just say, well, it's going to be around $50, and then vote and say, okay, we're going to go ahead and do it? Wouldn't you need a definite dollar amount to present to everybody before you vote on?
I believe we did.
It was $75 was the dollar amount.
It was said.
prorated for other upperclassmen.
Right.
Right, no, I understand, but it was said like around $50 a year, whatever. Are these things that belong to that student from when they get it, like they take it home with them and it is
Right,
theirs?
if you opt in as a freshman or even as a junior or senior later on, and you opt in to pay the fee or the prorated fee, the student will own the iPads once they graduate.
Okay,
They
and then
will take them home
what
next.
will happen when parents turn around and go, I can't afford another $75 for registration or for the, because it's gonna happen with more people than you think. What's gonna then happen with those parents that cannot afford it, especially if they have more than one child in the school being registered?
Yeah, we'll work out a plan to work with the parent to pay it out over time, or give them options, or simply loan one and then get it back at the end. But there'll be adjustments along the way. Somebody will not be denied the opportunity of the iPad.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you. Do we have anybody else?
They have no more person speaking from their group. Dean or Joe? Yes.
You all know I wasn't happy at the last meeting.
So your name, sir?
Dean Woodward. My comment is to ask Johnson a question. Why did Mr. Johnson,
Mr. Johnson.
we ain't earned that right yet. But I'm gonna say, let me say what I have to say here.
Gentlemen,
Why did Mr. Johnson think that he was going to get the opponent to head football coach for Hillcrest? Was this something that was promised to him by Mr. Johnson? Were you promised this position?
Yes, when we was running for it. I was already appointed for 8 days to the position. And as soon as I get everything straightened out, I will be suing the district for that position back.
But you were promised that position.
We wasn't promised, we was mapping out where we could best help as parents with progress to move the district forward. Hillcrest had a losing streak to where they had only won one game and lost 45. I have 30 years of coaching, and I was gonna apply that to help move this district forward and get that team back to where those kids could at least hold their head up high. Put in other aspects of it is meeting with the parents and going door to door to each one of these students to get the parents on board to come out and support these kids. And if they didn't have a father figure in their life, then they can go to a neighbor or somebody that will come out and support this kid.
I understand, I'm not calling you out, I don't even know you.
Yes, sir.
I'm just trying to get to the bottom of some things.
Okay.
Next question. Mr. Cannon.
yes.
Did you direct Tinley Park High School to hold an unscheduled assembly during testing week when the band won state? Just out of curiosity, which of you has students as a band member?
To your first point of that question, absolutely not. And I do have children that go to school. Yes.
I do as well, in the band program.
What's that?
I have children as well at this high school, the band program.
At graduation, there was a lot of talk about reserve seating from Larry Canny and Kimberly Hemworth. Did you request this special seating?
Did I request special seating?
Mhm.
Oh, I had asked Randy Cowanhoven if we could, if I could get some seats closer by the band. My son was performing, and my other son was graduating. So, and I said, absolutely, by no means, there should be no special treatment on that.
Dr. Kendall? How many board members ever requested special seating at graduation? To your knowledge?
I have no knowledge of that. I don't know.
None at all? And you've been at the school for,
This, I finished my 12th year.
no, I'm just gonna say something that I think that the new people that were elected to the board, I think you guys should do the right thing and step down. Because there's a lot of talk. And as business owners, people that live in Tinley Park that pay the tax there, we're gonna keep packing this house. Every board meeting you guys have, we're gonna pack it. So just be prepared for it.
Thank you. Everybody else?
Joe Bears, were you going to speak?
I think we covered everything, and I appreciate you giving us back the answers to the questions we had at the prior meeting. Fortunately, some of them we don't understand, so we'll take a close look at them and probably present you with something else at the next meeting.
Okay, good enough, thank you. Okay, there being no other public comments, I'd like to close the floor and move on to reports. Superintendent.
Freedom of Information Act request since our last board meeting. Mr. Morgan Polikoff of USC Rossier School of Education in Los Angeles, California, requested math and science textbooks used for each grade, the version, title, publisher, and the year the textbooks were first used. This request has been completed. Mr. Adam Dietrich of Chicago Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law requested records since August 1, 2013, showing the number of District 228 students who have been notified that the school district is seeking suspension, suspended, notified that the district is seeking expulsion, expelled, referred to an alternative school, or transferred by the district to an alternative school, along with the school, grade, race, gender, and disability status of each student, this request has been completed. Mrs. Leslie Jones of Markham requested any and all emails received by Larry Canning on both his district email and personal email with regards to the outcry from the community to terminate the Schraga Hauser law firm. This request is being processed. For the superintendent's report, District 228 summer school program started on June 8th at Bremen High School. The number of students participating in the program is down by 53 students. This reduction is actually good news because it demonstrates that our students do not need those makeup classes because they're passing more classes during the school year. So that's good news. In addition to the summer school, close to 300 students are participating in either a summer academy or an advanced placement boot camp program. These programs are in place to provide enrichment for our students and to prepare students for the rigors of high school. This morning, I visited our first STEM academy held at Oak Forest High School. At the academy, more than 100 teachers from all of our feeder schools are working with Dr. Williams, Mr. Granite, and our science teachers to better understand the next generation science standards and to share with each other best practices in teaching science. When I left, they were working on problem-based inquiry, and they were also building a mousetrap car and struggling with that. I really want to commend Mr. Granite for all his work in getting all of our feeder school districts together. Seeing all those science teachers struggling and working was really a good experience for me, so thank you. I want to thank Mr. Singer for all his work on behalf of the students at District 228 and wish him nothing but the best as he moves on to his new position at Niles North High School. I also want to publicly welcome Lisa Giglio-Bisek and Sandra Lessentine. Lisa is the recommended candidate to replace Matt, and Sandy will be our new math supervisor. We welcome both of you and wish you best of luck in your new positions. Thank you. Finally, no, I got one more. Finally, I'd like to introduce Dr. Nolan. She has some special friends she wants to acknowledge.
I do. At Christmas break, we'd received our scores from our students who took a practice ACT test the day before Thanksgiving break. And so when it's a little bit quiet in the building, when all the students are home, we're looking at all these scores. I got a little bit alarmed to see how many of our students on that practice test were falling below the state average, which in 2014 was 20.7. So very quickly, and when I say very quickly, sometimes you have to think outside the box and use the resources that are around you. And at that point in time, I reached out to a very wonderful resource, and I hope it's a resource for many, many years to come, and that was the Tinley Park Sylvan Learning Center. And I had called Angie, and Angie and I had known each other, Angie Cronin, from some past experiences and working in the community. And I said, here's the deal, I need some help. And so, again, very quickly, we came together and she helped us devise an opportunity for our students to actually engage in Sylvan Learning Center's ACT prep program here during the school day at a cost which was so low it blew my mind that I was just thrilled that our students had this opportunity. Just quickly throwing it out there, 116 students were identified from the practice test as falling below the state standards. So you can understand why I was panicking looking at those scores. And we can sit there and say, well, it was a practice test, or we can have all those conversations, but the fact of the matter is we needed to do something. In a matter of 48 hours, because we had some cold days where we called off school, in a matter of 48 hours, hats off to the Tinley administrative team, we called down all of those 116 students, and we had 85 students and their parents agree to sign on the dotted line for a cost of $200 to take what is normally the $1,100 ACT prep program through Sylvan during the school day. Of those 85 students who signed on to the program, only 16 of them were looking to do any type of additional ACT prep before the test. So I think you can see the writing on the wall that had we not done anything, where would we be? That 85 are signed in and only 16 were looking to better their situation. So students gave up their lunch and study hall. They came in here into the Audion. Angie and her crew devised, the groups came through here for that hour for 20 different periods. They were exposed to 20 different sessions. And just to share a little bit of the data with you, and I know this isn't a full-blown school presentation, but I just have to share some of this with you. Only 10 of those, 84 finished the program. Only 10 of those 84 students came in here with a 20. What we did is we targeted students that had a 15 to a 20. Now, we did have a couple under the 15 mark that joined us, but basically we looked at the numbers of 15 through 20. 10 of those 84 students came in at a 20. By the end of the program, 44 students had a minimum of a 20 or higher. So 44 of 84 students who were falling between a 15 and a 20 finished with a 20 or higher by the end of the program. And these are students who are not going to do anything to better their situations. And again, they may not better their situations because maybe they can't afford to go out and take advantage of that ACT prep program. They became our partner. The kids loved the different instructors that came through. Everybody had their own little presentation, and I would say their own little quirks about them. But I just have to, and then a few other stats. Our English score, just the English composite score, went up 276 points for the group. 276 points. Math increased 87 points, reading increased 112 points. There's something to be said for this. And like I said, it was very quickly thrown together. I am unbelievably appreciative to Angie and her crew. So at this time, I'd actually like to ask you guys to come up here and join me. And I'm very, very pleased and proud to be able to present them to you tonight, to thank them for creating this opportunity for our Tinley Park High School students.
On behalf of the board, I'd like to present this plaque to you. It states that the Board of Education presents this award to Sylvan Learning Center of Tinley Park. You have helped to provide a positive learning environment for the students of District 228 by the time and talent you share. Thank you for caring.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I gotta get in here for a picture. Stearns.
Thank you.
And if you want to share a few words, or?
Sure. Well, we would just like, I'm Angie Cronin, I'm the owner of Sylvan in Tinley Park, and we would just like to thank Teresa for making our experience so easy, and they were so welcoming and made our job so easy. I did not provide the actual prep course, but Kristen was one of our teachers, and these two lovely sisters are my directors at my Sylvan, and so instrumental in helping provide the whole thing. So we just hope that we can continue to work with Tinley Park High School.
We do too.
And hopefully spread some excitement district-wide, because we'd love to help all the other high schools in the area.
Great. Thank you for your assistance.
Thank you.
I'd like to move on to board members that have any reports.
Yes.
Mrs. Jones.
I was able to attend the Oak Forest Memorial Day service on May 25th. Oak Forest High School choir performed many selections for the veterans for the Memorial Day services and sang several songs in honor of our vets. Also, Oak Forest students, one of the students tooted the trumpet to taps as we reflected on those who gave the ultimate sacrifice of life. Present were many residents, Mayor Kuspa's family, and the Boy Scouts of Oak Forest even served refreshments to all those who were present. This was a wonderful program to recognize those who served our country well, and it was an honor to be there. And also, on the other hand, I would like to question our president on the emails that were presented. I know on April 28th, we had a question of the emails that you had promised, and I was wondering why that has not been fulfilled.
You said emails that were presented?
Emails that you stated that you would present.
Yes, I sent you an email. I don't know if you've gotten it sometime last week stating that I do not have permission to pass those emails along to you or anybody else without the person that made those emails permission.
What about the Open Meetings Act as well as the FOIA?
Yeah, the FOIA request, it does not pertain to personal emails, and you're quite welcome to any of my district emails, which there is none, so.
Because it relates to the personal as well as, I believe the FOIA states that it's personal as well as public emails.
Yeah,
As it pertains to, only as it pertains to what your promise and the outcry from the community. Because I was interested in what the community had to say.
Oh, absolutely.
Since that was, basically the basis for it.
Right, and I would encourage you to, as I stated in my email to you, I would encourage you to get on different media outlets, and also there's plenty of discussion about that topic.
Do you have a specific site that you visit?
You could just plug in a
Because that's not what
topic.
you stated. I know you stated the emails was what you.
As I stated, I cannot give you those. I do not have permission from those people that created those emails, so I would never do that. I would never violate their trust.
I understand the trust issue, but there's I believe, Open Meetings Act that states under communication, if you look under communication, it states that none are considered private, but they're considered.
Yes, and I'm definitely well aware of that act, and after consultation with the attorney, I cannot hand those personal emails over to you. It does not fall
So the
under
attorney
that act.
confirmed that you cannot?
Well, after I had gotten a request, sure, I had to consult the attorney and see where, I stood legally on each of those personal emails, and it was consulted to me that I do not have to turn them over because it's communications from the public. And one of my personal things with the public is, I never bring up names. Well, of course, unless they okay it.
Right.
Okay,
I'm not
so-
looking for the names. I understand you said there was several outcries from the community. I think this was the way that you worded it.
I cannot provide them, so that's my final answer on that.
That's your final answer. Okay.
Did you get, I'm sorry, did you get my email?
I got it, but I just didn't understand the.
Because I didn't want you to think that I was ignoring you, obviously, so I wanted you to have that email.
Yeah, I just was wondering why it took 2.5 months to come up with that, because I was looking at the public access from public access counselor and everything. And I did receive it, I have it.
And not only emails, there's, as I stated before, during campaigns and situations like that, there's quite a bit of communicating with the community by knocking on doors and getting their opinions on how our district is being run. So a lot of that too has stemmed from them, okay? So it'd be the same thing. I wouldn't give you addresses to everybody that I spoke with that had a comment regarding certain situations in the district. I couldn't do that.
Well, I'm not asking for that, I was just asking for the electronic.
And give you an example falls underneath that as well.
So if you have a social media website or whatever, I appreciate that. If you can give me a direct.
Google the topic. It'll come up. Mrs. Gleason.
Mr. Canning, unfortunately, what you're saying and what your attorney advised you is incorrect.
Okay.
According to board policy, our board policy 2.140, there is no expectation of privacy for any communication sent to the board or its members, whether by letter, email, or other means. Board policy. Well, you sent us an email saying you can't do any of this because it's their privacy. You're wrong. There is no expectation of privacy.
On my district website is public. It belongs to the public. Okay.
And
So
because
if
you
there's any
brought, also because
communications-
you brought it up at a public meeting, that makes it foiable. You mentioned at a public meeting that you had emails, and so they are FOIA.
I don't want to argue with you about the
Well, you do
topic.
want to argue with us because you won't provide anything.
It's personal emails, and I do not have to provide personal emails on
You do when you talk about them at a public board meeting, sitting at the chair. And also, you sent us a letter about
I never
opening.
mentioned specifically any specific email.
You said you had emails from many people, hundreds of people who said they objected to a conflict of interest. Which according to the school code, that is not a conflict of interest, that my son is an attorney for Hauserism. So you might want to look that up in the school code. You also sent us a letter during the past month, an email saying that if anybody opened your mail at the district office, there would be dire consequences. Again, our own policy says you have no expectation of privacy for that. So I would like a copy of that super secret letter you got that nobody can open.
Okay.
I demand a copy.
Mrs. Gleason,
As
can I point
ordinary.
out that you violated the Open Meetings Act by sending an email to all of us
Yes,
at one time?
thank you, Mrs. Stanford. I apologize.
If we're talking about violations, just
Well,
bringing it to the
but you're withholding information, and I want it.
Duly
And
noted.
our own policy says you have to give it to us, so.
Anybody here?
Yes. In our finance meeting with Mr. O'Malley, you suggested, Mr. Canning, that 50% of the football revenue goes to the band. I would like to comment on that, and isn't that an issue that should be brought before the entire board to vote on it before you give a directive to Mr. O'Malley?
Mr. O'Malley, do you recall that statement?
We talked about looking at band and fine arts for some additional funding in the future, but I don't recall a statement about that.
About 50%? Mr. Johnson, I don't understand your question, and if you could elaborate a little
The
bit more on it.
50% is something that you wanted to go to the band. And then you asked that Mr. O'Malley set up a formula where band uniforms are new band uniforms every 4 years. So they can have some expectations on when they're gonna get band uniforms. One of the ways that you talked about doing it was taking 50% of the revenue,
50% of what revenue?
the revenue, the gate. When people come into the football games, they pay to get in there.
I don't understand what you're talking about.
That was revenue that you wanted to go to the
No, I
to the
was at
band.
that meeting, Mr. Johnson. I don't
I know.
recall
I'm sure you
discussing
don't.
any gate revenue. We
Mrs.
discussed,
Bresler, do you recall?
We were going over the athletic budget, and we had questions as to if there were similar budgets for other programs in the district, including the arts and the band program, just to give the faculty members more of an idea of how much money they can spend when they need things, like the football teams and sports athletes are able to.
So we were using the other sports team as an example.
We were using them as an example.
I was listening to that. So are you saying that Mr. O'Malley should be setting up something for every 4 years that the new band uniforms be bought? Did y'all say that, Ms. Kemper?
no, we were talking about the budgets for the different athletic groups and the fine arts groups, and perhaps when each group could expect a time to talk about new equipment, perhaps every 4 years, what would be
Oh,
the
so you did
timeline?
every 4 years.
Well, Mr. Johnson,
Perhaps.
these teams, or these programs have not received proper funding for years. These programs have gone for 15 years without new
Did the
uniforms.
band
So
get
what we have to do-
$40,000 last year? That came to mind too, somebody told me.
Which
Did-
band are you referring to?
Tell me.
Knocked it out.
Okay, not that you were.
Wasn't there some adjustment made to band last year? They got additional money?
There was additional money put aside for equipment, yes.
Okay.
Based on, they requested money because they needed new equipment. They never said anything about uniforms.
Not to my knowledge.
And I don't recall seeing anything about band on the agenda.
Was that on the agenda?
For the finance meetings? No, it's
Yeah.
not.
Okay. Is that an issue that will have to come before the entire board and vote on?
Well, I won't answer for Mr. O'Malley, but, you know, things like that are, I believe, are line items, and I also think we discussed band and fine arts being line items that, you know, Tom, would you like to speak on that?
Okay, what we did comment on was that Mr. Anderson, the fine arts supervisor, this year did have a conversation with myself regarding uniforms, and I requested the inventories, which he's provided, and I stated at the meeting that Dr. Williams and I would be meeting with Mr. Anderson to review things, and then if needed, we would address some things as far as the budget was concerned.
You know, I'll definitely go on record to say that these programs have been neglected over the years, and they need to be looked at just like any other program that kids participate in our district. You know, we have to be as fair as we can in these situations, because, you know, fine arts kids work just as hard as basketball and football kids do. So we have to make sure and be sensitive to the fact that, you know, fine arts kids need new paintbrushes, and band members need their equipment adjusted from time to time, and new uniforms from time to time. This is just, once we commit to these programs, we have to make sure they're properly funded in the best way possible. And definitely that's what I would like to convey to you, Mr. Johnson, is to make sure if we're going to have these programs, that they're, for one, fairly balanced. And as far as for the past couple of years, I've looked at it, and, you know, the fine arts program could use a boost. Now, where we get that boost, we'll leave it up to our professional finance director, Mr. O'Malley. And he can bring that to us, and then, yes, we can have a vote on it, whether that's appropriate or not.
Because I thought you was giving him a directive.
There's no directives and no votes in committee meetings.
That's all I was saying. Okay.
If you'll notice, Mr. Johnson, in the summary notes, what we talked about was the fall athletic equipment and supplies bids. So that was the topic we discussed. It had nothing to do with the band.
Went off onto a whole new tangent with that, Ms. Campbell. Yeah, I'm finished.
Okay, thank you. Any? Mrs. Gleason?
Three more items. First of all, I'd like to address the people in the audience who asked about graduation. I've been on board for 23 years. I have 2 children graduate from Bremen. To the best of my knowledge, no one has ever requested or received priority seating at graduation. Maybe I could have requested it. I never did, and my son did sing at his graduation when I graduated, so just for your information. I'd also like to mention, I don't know how many people have seen or followed the trials of Lincoln Way High School that was kind of thrown in the face of the people who were running for election this spring as those are the districts we should be emulating. They're in, according to the story in Sunday Southtown, they're in some deep trouble, faced with cutting programs, closing a school, or looking for a tax referendum, none of which are good options. We have maintained for the number of years here a structural deficit that we can manage. We are not on the state's financial watch list. Our budget is balanced. And so I say we've done a pretty damn good job, and I'd just like to state that publicly. Finally, as we're saying that, I'd like to also mention that, once again, the state budget has not been passed. Property tax freeze is still on the table. The governor is seeking a freeze. The legislature doesn't want it, but the budget is $5 billion out of sync. The new budget begins July 1. If something is not passed and signed by the governor, we will be impacted because our state aid will be impacted starting July 1, along with the shutdown of many state programs and so on and so on. So it's something that bears watching. The legislature is still meeting a couple times a week. You can check them out on their website at ilga.gov, and I think it's something we should all be interested in. And we should be contacting our local legislators when they are home.
Finished?
I'd also like to mention that we have not heard one word from Scope about property tax freeze.
Okay. Thank you, Mrs. Gleason. Committee reports. Mrs. Resnick. Oh,
in regards to band, every group, there's never enough money for everybody.
Sure, absolutely.
Several years in a row, I managed to get a local venue that we could have had a fine arts festival, drama kids, art kids, band, choir. They had a thing for the whole day. Could have charged, our kids could have sold their work. Imagine the funds that could have raised. Wasn't utilized. They probably could have gotten new uniforms every year.
Right. Well, obviously, that has to be looked into, every means possible has to be explored. And I know a lot of the programs do a great job with the jazz cafes and the art festivals and things like that. So, you know, they do try, but like you said, there's never enough money. Anybody else?
I would just like to report, as a new board member, first of all, I just want to say that I very much enjoyed participating in all 4 graduations. It was an honor not only to give my son his diploma this year, but all the other graduates and to watch all their excited faces. So as a new board member, that was a very positive experience for me. Also, I completed my board member training, and I just wanted to state that I thought the IASB did a great job presenting the material to us. It was a 2-day training, fast-paced. We received a lot of material. We went over a lot. We have a lot to learn, or I have a lot to learn, and I enjoyed the experience. That's all.
Anybody else? Thank you. Okay, committee reports. Mrs. Breslin, Finance.
All right, Finance Committee met on Monday, June 8th. It was called to order at 7:03 p.m. Present were myself, Mrs. Ressler, Mrs. Campworth, Mr. Canning, and Mr. O'Malley. Absent were none. Guests were Mr. Johnson and Vanessa Ressler. Old business, none. New business, June bills, impress funds, and deposits. The committee reviewed and discussed the June bills, impress expenditures, and deposits. These items have been reviewed with the superintendent, who, along with the finance committee, is recommending full board approval of the June bills, addendum to bills, impress expenditures, and deposits. Over $5,000 purchase orders, there were none. Career Development Systems, CDS bills. The Finance Committee reviewed the CDS bills totaling $356,104.54. The Finance Committee, along with the Superintendent, is recommending full board approval of the CDS June bills as presented. 2014-2015 amended budget. The Finance Committee discussed the needs to amend the 2014-2015 budget based on the final audit adjustments. These adjustments revised the final figures for the administrative cost worksheet component of the ISBE budget form. The audit adjustments pushed the cap over the 5% allowable margin. Slight adjustments to the budget have been made to bring the percentage to 4%, which is below the administrative cost cap. The Finance Committee, along with the Superintendent, is recommending full board approval of the 2014-2015 amended budget. Fall athletic equipment and supplies bid. The Finance Committee discussed the fall athletic equipment and supplies bid, and the Finance Committee, along with the Superintendent, recommends acceptance of the low bids totaling $45,085.99. Property and casualty insurance renewal. The Finance Committee reviewed and discussed the proposed renewal from Meserole Financial for fiscal year 2016. The annual premiums for the renewal will decrease by $2,240 based on favorable experience. The Finance Committee, along with the Superintendent, recommend full board approval of the renewal. Health and dental insurance renewal. The Finance Committee reviewed and discussed the proposed renewal provided by Meserole Financial for fiscal year 2016. The dental renewal rates call for a 3.1% decrease. This is very favorable considering the market trend. The HMO renewal rates will decrease by 0.6%. Again, very favorable considering the market trends have averages of 6 to 8% increase. The PPO program renewal rates will increase by 2.5%. These rates are based on the district's claim experience and are below the market trend that averages between 6 and 8% increase. The Finance Committee, along with the Superintendent, recommends full board approval of these renewals. Busing renewal. The Finance Committee discussed the busing renewal with the Illinois School Bus for our regular education transportation and Alpha School Bus for our special education transportation. The negotiated renewal rates for the 2015-16 school year will increase by 1% for regular education and 2.25% for special education transportation. These are very favorable rates based on the fuel escalation costs. The Finance Committee, along with Superintendent, recommends full board approval for the busing renewal. Extermination contract renewal. The Finance Committee discussed the renewal of Smithereen Pest Management Services, Inc. to provide our pest management services for the district. They have agreed to hold the current pricing for the upcoming year. The Finance Committee, along with the Superintendent, recommend full board approval for extermination cost contract renewal. Disposal contract renewal. The Finance Committee discussed the proposal from Homewood Disposal provided the disposal services for the district. They have agreed to hold the current pricing for the upcoming year. This no increase renewal is favorable for the district. The Finance Committee, along with the Superintendent, recommends full board approval for the disposal contract renewal. Fire alarm maintenance contract renewal. The Finance Committee discussed a proposal from Affiliated Customer Service, Inc. to provide the fire alarm service for the district. We have negotiated a 3-year renewal that will obtain the current pricing for the next 3 years. This cost containment will assist the district with minimizing future costs for operations. The Finance Committee, along with the Superintendent, recommends full board approval for the disposal contract renewal. Hillcrest Mammoth Unit Replacement Bid. The Finance Committee reviewed and discussed the bid received for the replacement HVAC units at Hillcrest High School. Amber Mechanical was the low bid, totaling $358,000. Other associated costs of $36,480 for engineering, soffit, and ceiling work bring the total project to $394,480. This is within the budget estimated for this project. The Finance Committee, along with the Superintendent, recommends acceptance of the low bid from Amber Mechanical. PTAB, A.J. Smith Federal Savings Bank. The Finance Committee reviewed and discussed the PTAB pertaining to A.J. Smith Federal Savings Bank. The attorney has negotiated a settlement regarding this property pertaining to the 2009 and 2010 tax years. This settlement is in the best interest of the district and will prevent the potential revenue loss of over $6,000. The committee, along with the superintendent, recommends full board approval for the proposed settlement. Discussion. Prevailing wage resolution. The Finance Committee discussed the resolution required by the state of Illinois pertaining to the necessary transfer of funds pertaining to the budget. The necessary resolution will be acted on at the June board meeting. The superintendent recommends approval of the fund transfer resolution. The next meeting will be July 13th at 7 p.m. in the Administration Center. Our meeting was adjourned at 8:02 p.m.
Okay. Thank you, Mrs. Ressler. Mrs. Stearns, Personnel.
Personnel met on June 8th. All members were present. We have no comments from the public. The following are recommended for full board approval. For certificated staff at Bremen, we have 2 family and consumer science teachers, a bilingual English teacher, and a part-time 80% science teacher. And at Hillcrest, also a family and consumer science teacher. At Oak Forest, the maternity leave and FMLA requests of an English teacher and the approval of 2 special ed teachers. At the district level, a change in position of a special ed coordinator to the director of special ed. And for educational support personnel, we have at Bremen the approval of the maternity leave request for an ELL aide. And at Oak Forest, the approval of the change in position of a supervisor secretary to the athletic director's secretary. And we will meet again on July 13th.
Great, thank you, Mrs. Stearns. Mr. O'Malley, 8.1 on the agenda, bills and addendums.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Board members, the Finance Committee has reviewed the bills, the monthly addendum to bills, the payroll and the CDS bills, and along with the superintendent, we're recommending those to the full board for approval.
Okay, I'd be looking for a motion to approve item 8.1.
So moved.
Moved by Mrs. Ressler,
Second.
second by Mrs. Campbell. Any discussion?
I'd like to pull 8.7 for a separate vote.
8.7. Okay, yeah, we can do that. Sure, we can do that. 8.7, health and benefits. Yeah, that's a separate vote. That's its own vote, Mrs. Stearns.
We're voting on each of these
Yes.
individual
Yes. Okay. Okay. Any discussion on the bills, addendums to the bills, payroll, and CD bills? Roll call vote.
Mrs. Ressler? Aye. Mrs. Camworth? Aye. Mrs. Gleason?
Aye.
Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
Mrs. Jones?
Aye.
Ms. Stearns?
Aye.
Mr. Canning?
Aye. 8.2, Mr. O'Malley.
Item 8.2 pertains to our 2014-2015 amended budget that we discussed in the public hearing. The Finance Committee, along with the Superintendent, are recommending the amended budget this evening.
Okay, I'd be looking for a motion to approve item 8.2.
So moved.
Moved by Mrs. Resler,
Second.
second by Mrs. Jones. Any discussion? Okay, roll call. Mrs. Camworth?
Mrs. Ressler? Aye. Mrs. Jones?
Aye.
Mrs. Gleason?
Aye.
Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
Mrs. Camworth? Aye. Ms. Stearns?
Aye.
Mr. Canning?
Aye.
Item 8.3 pertains to the ratification of the BEST contract. Last month, the members of the BEST union voted to ratify the tentatively agreed agreement. We're asking the board to ratify the tentatively agreed contract this evening. Finance Committee has discussed this, and the Superintendent is recommending this evening.
Okay. Be looking for a motion to approve item 8.3.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mrs. Gleason and seconded by Mrs. Stearns. Discussion?
Mr. Canning, if I may, I'd just like to thank the members of the BEST negotiating team, Charlene Innocente, Valerie Snyder, and Claudia Allred for all their work and their efforts, as well as Val Gardner from the IEA. It was a long, arduous process, but we got through it, and we feel we have an agreement that's acceptable on both parties. So I'd like to thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion? Anybody else? Okay, Mrs. Camworth?
Mrs. Gleason?
Aye.
Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
Mrs. Jones?
Aye.
Mrs. Camworth? Aye. Mrs. Ressler?
Aye.
Ms. Stearns?
Aye.
Mr. Canning?
Aye.
Item 8.4 pertains to the Southwest Co-op Articles of Joint Agreement. There are a couple revisions, small revisions, to bring the current amendments in compliance with Public Acts 96-0769 and 96-0783 pertaining to withdrawal of membership from the cooperative. Superintendent is recommending those to the board this evening.
Be looking for a motion to approve item 8.4.
So moved.
Moved by Mrs. Resler,
Second.
second by Mrs. Jones. Any discussion? No discussion. Mrs. Camworth, roll call, please.
Mrs. Ressler?
Aye.
Mrs. Jones?
Aye.
Mrs. Gleason?
Aye.
Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
Mrs. Camworth? Aye. Ms. Stearns?
Aye.
Mr. Canning?
Aye.
Item 8.5 pertains to the PTAB for A.J. Smith Federal Savings Bank. The attorney has negotiated a settlement that pertains to the 2009 and 2010 tax year. The Finance Committee has reviewed this, and it's going to, if settled and negotiated, it's going to save the district a revenue loss of over $6,000. The committee, along with the superintendent, are recommending this evening.
Okay. Be looking for a motion to approve item 8.6.
So moved.
Moved by Mrs. Resler.
It's 8.5.
Oh, I'm sorry, 8.5. Moved by Mrs. Resler.
Second.
Second by Mrs. Gleason. Any discussion? No discussion. Mrs. Camworth, roll call, please.
Mrs. Ressler?
Aye.
Mrs. Gleason?
Aye.
Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
Mrs. Jones?
Aye.
Mrs. Camworth? Aye. Ms. Stearns?
Aye.
Mr. Canning?
Aye.
Item 8.6 pertains to our liability insurance renewal. As discussed in committee, this renewal is going to be $2,200 less than the current year, which is very favorable. The committee, along with the superintendent, is recommending these renewals to the board.
Okay, looking for a motion to approve item 8.6.
So moved.
Moved by Mrs. Gleason,
Second.
second by Mrs. Gleason. Any discussion? There's none. Roll call, Mrs. Campbell.
Mrs. Gleason?
Aye.
Mrs. Wrestler?
Aye.
Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
Mrs. Jones?
Aye.
Mrs. Camworth, aye. Ms. Stearns?
Aye.
Mr. Canning?
Aye.
Item 8.7 pertains to the health and dental insurance renewals. As Mrs. Wrestler pointed out, these renewals, two of them were decreases and the other one was a slight increase, which is very favorable in lieu of market trend. We'd be recommending these to the board this evening.
I actually would like to break these up, health and dental, into.
Okay. Yeah, I believe we need to move it first. Okay. So I'd be looking for a motion to split the health and the dental into two items.
So moved. Second.
We got moved by Mrs. Stearns and second by Mrs. Jones. Any discussion on that?
I just wanted to ask Tom, are the finances or the figures able to be divided up or to separate them out? Can we do?
Yeah, the figures are already separated out. We just bundle the renewal all together.
Okay.
So there's a renewal for the HMO with Blue Cross Blue Shield, there's a renewal for the PPO with Blue Cross Blue Shield, and then the dental is separate, that's with Allied Benefits.
Okay.
Okay, roll call on the split of the items. Mrs. Camper? To split it?
Just vote on each one separately. We have to vote
I don't know, it's a new process. I've
Should
never
have
been through that
motioned the whole
process.
thing, and then she could have pulled out the health, which is what that's part of the concern.
Is it part of the health that you're concerned with, Mrs. Stearns? We could do health first, and that would be now 8.71. So I'm looking for a motion for 8.71, which is the health part of this. Ms. Stearns, yes. So is there any discussion on that?
Yes.
Yes.
I understand that this time we're getting favorable renewals, but it is built up in previous years so much to where I believe it is a hard on especially like our best people, paying 20% of the rates. And I had asked previously if we had looked at increasing co-pays on prescriptions or increasing co-pays on office visits to see if we could lower that. Was any of that done?
Yeah, we have reviewed that with the broker, and that is something we've had discussions with the JFA during several insurance meetings, and those are possibilities moving forward for the future.
But not this time. What would our cost savings have been if we, say, put prescription co-pays to like $30?
We have a whole menu of savings options that we can, and those are items that we would have to negotiate. And at the time, when we negotiated with the best, that was not something that was discussed, but it is something that we're looking at doing with the JFA. And we can implement those at any time. It doesn't have to just be the renewal. So if that is something that is negotiated, that we decide to raise co-pays or out-of-pocket maximums or whatever the case, we can implement that throughout the year and have those rates then adjusted down for that particular group.
So what I'm hearing is there is potential cost savings, but we didn't seek them.
It has to be an agreed upon negotiated item to change the benefits. This,
So what if we're entering into negotiations with JFA now?
yes.
So are we planning to negotiate with JFA and our insurance carrier at the same time? Or what are we gonna present to JFA if we're not taking it to our insurance?
Yeah, we've already done that. We have the scenario or the menu list, if you will, of if we do this, the renewal ends up being this, and the savings are X. We have those. The broker has reviewed those with the carrier, and that is something that we'll be reviewing during the negotiation process with the union.
And if we sign this renewal and say by some miracle we agree on a contract with JFA next week, we can say, okay, we're gonna change and go
Components
this.
of this menu can be incorporated. Yes, that's correct.
But it does not change for Best.
It would not change for best.
Even if it was a savings for them, they could benefit a little bit more money in their pocket.
So that's something, I mean, we could always come back to the table if we make that adjustments with JFA, we could come back to the table with Best, and if they wanted to see that same situation take place, we could do that.
Mrs. Gleason.
I thought the insurance coverage was the same for both bargaining units.
It is, but we have it broken out, the way we have it sectioned off is by groups, so that allows us the flexibility to do that. Traditionally, we have not differentiated benefit levels. It's been the same benefit level, but that's not to say that it can't be done.
Any other discussion? Mrs. Camworth, roll call. This will be on 8.71.
Ms. Stearns?
Yes.
Mrs. Jones?
Aye.
Mrs. Gleason?
Aye.
Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
Mrs. Camworth, aye. Mrs. Wrestler?
Aye.
Mr. Canning?
Aye. Yeah, we're going to go now, since we split that to the dental, which would be 8.72. I'm looking for a motion to approve 8.
So moved.
Second. Moved by Mrs. Resler, second by Mr. Johnson. Or Mrs. Spencer. Any discussion on the dental portion of the insurance renewal? No? Okay, Mrs. Campbell.
And Mrs. Stearns?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
Mrs. Gleason?
Aye.
Mrs. Jones?
Aye.
Mrs. Camworth, aye. Mrs. Wrestler?
Aye.
Mr. Canning?
Aye.
Item 8.8 pertains to the Prevailing Wage Act. This is an annual item that's required by the state of Illinois. Finance Committee has discussed this, and we're recommending the resolution and the list of wages along with the superintendent to the full board.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mrs. Gleason, second by Mrs. Stearns. Any discussion?
This is part of the negotiation going on in Springfield because the prevailing wage does add significant cost to public projects.
Okay. Any other? Okay, Mrs. Campworth?
Mrs. Gleason?
Aye.
Ms. Stearns?
Aye.
Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
Mrs. Jones?
Aye.
Mrs. Camworth, aye. Mrs. Wrestler?
Aye.
Mr. Canning?
Aye.
Item 8.9 pertains to our annual fall athletic equipment and supplies bids. We have reviewed these and we're recommending the low bids to the board this evening.
Looking for approval on item 8.9.
So moved.
Moved by Mrs. Resler. Second by Mr. Johnson. Any discussion on the bids? Mrs. Camworth, roll call.
Mrs. Wrestler?
Aye.
Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
Mrs. Gleason?
Aye.
Mrs. Jones?
Aye.
Mrs. Camworth, aye. Ms. Stearns?
Aye.
Mr. Canning?
Aye.
Item 8.10 pertains to our busing contract renewal. We're recommending to the board a one-year renewal with Illinois School Bus to provide the regular ed transportation, and a one-year renewal with Alpha School Bus to provide the special needs transportation.
Looking for a motion on item 8.10. Moved by Mrs. Jones, second by Mrs. Stearns. Any discussion?
Do we know how many buses are actually involved?
We run approximately 8 to 10 routes every morning at all 4 buildings, so you're looking at roughly 40 buses that are transporting our students.
That includes special ed or no?
No, that's just regular.
Okay.
Anybody else? Discussion?
That's,
Mrs. Camworth, roll call.
Mrs. Jones?
Aye.
Ms. Stearns? Mrs. Gleason?
Aye.
Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
Mrs. Camworth, aye. Mrs. Wrestler?
Aye.
Mr. Canning?
Aye.
Item 8.11 pertains to our extermination contract renewal. We're recommending Smithereen, who has agreed to hold their pricing again for the upcoming school year.
Looking for a motion on 8.11.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Johnson, second by Mrs. Stearns. Discussion. No discussion. Roll call, Mrs. Camworth.
Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
Ms. Stearns? Mrs. Gleason?
Aye.
Mrs. Jones?
Aye.
Mrs. Camworth, aye. Mrs. Wrestler? Aye. Mr. Canning?
Aye.
Item 8.12 pertains to our disposal contract. We're also recommending renewal of our disposal vendor, which is Homewood Disposal, for the 15-16 school year. And again, this is at the current pricing for the upcoming year.
Looking for a motion to approve 8.12.
Second.
Moved by Mrs. Stearns, second by Mr. Johnson. Any discussion? Discussion, roll call, Mrs. Camworth.
Ms. Stearns?
aye.
Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
Ms. Gleason?
Aye.
Mrs. Jones?
Aye.
Mrs. Camworth, aye. Mrs. Wrestler? Aye. Mr. Canning?
Aye.
Item 8.13 pertains to our fire alarm maintenance contract renewal. We negotiated a 3-year renewal with Affiliated, and they've agreed to hold their pricing for the next 3 years to provide fire alarm maintenance to the district. We're recommending this to the full board this evening.
So moved.
Moved by Mrs. Stearns, second by Mr. Johnson. Any discussion? No? Mrs. Camworth, roll call.
Ms. Stearns?
Aye.
Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
Mrs. Gleason?
Aye.
Mrs. Jones?
Aye.
Mrs. Camworth, aye. Mrs. Wrestler? Aye. Mr. Canning?
Aye.
Item 8.14 pertains to our Hillcrest Mammoth unit replacement bids. We're recommending the low bidder for this project, along with the associated costs, bringing the total cost to $394,480.
So moved.
Moved by Mrs. Stearns,
Second.
second by Mr. Johnson. Any discussion?
Tom, can you just explain for everyone what?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. The Mammoth units, there are 3 large rooftop Mammoth units located on the 2nd story of Hillcrest High School. Those units service all of the 1st and 2nd floor heating and air conditioning for Hillcrest High School. Those units have outlived their useful life. They're approximately 30 years old, and we're going to be replacing them with much more energy efficient system that will also bring some more internal controls to the temperature regulation on both the 1st and 2nd floor Hillcrest. That's been an issue, an ongoing issue for a while.
I know the last couple of years that there were some nasty hot days in there.
Mr. O'Malley, is this a contractor we've worked with before?
Excuse me. Yes, it has. Amber Mechanical is a reputable contractor that we have done work with before.
Anybody else? Any other discussion on it? Mrs. Camworth, roll call, please.
Ms. Stearns?
Aye.
Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
Mrs. Gleason?
Aye.
Mrs. Jones?
Aye.
Mrs. Camworth, aye. Mrs. Wrestler?
Aye.
Mr. Canning?
Aye. Dr. Williams?
Item 8.15 is a textbook and supplemental material adoption. The Instructional Material Review Committee, comprised of teachers, parents, and administrators, reviewed the attached materials along with the Teaching and Learning Committee last month and recommend their consideration by the board. These materials, which are on display this evening, will be used to enhance instruction in the areas of mathematics, social studies, and world language. The superintendent is recommending these textbooks and supplemental materials for full board approval.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mrs. Gleason and second by Mrs. Stearns. Any discussion? No discussion? Mrs. Camworth?
Mrs. Gleason?
Aye.
Ms. Stearns?
Aye.
Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
Mrs. Jones?
Aye.
Mrs. Camworth, aye. Mrs. Wrestler?
Aye.
Mr. Canning?
Aye. Dr. Kendall, 8.16.
8.16 is the annual Illinois Association of School Board memberships. This membership is for the cost of $10,520 for the upcoming school year.
Okay, looking for a motion on 8.16.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Johnson,
Second.
second by Mrs. Stearns. Any discussion on this?
Ken, was there an increase from last year?
$170 increase from last year. Part of it's based on enrollment.
Anybody else? Okay, roll call, Mrs. Camworth.
Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
Ms. Stearns?
Aye.
Mrs. Gleason?
Aye.
Mrs. Jones?
Aye.
Mrs. Camworth, aye. Mrs. Wrestler?
Aye.
Mr. Canning?
Aye.
Item 8.17 is a resolution honoring the end of the 2014-15 school year. Ms. Camworth, could you read that resolution, please?
Yes.
Thank you.
Resolution recognizing the successful completion of the 2014-15 school year. Whereas, it is the mission of Bremen High School District 228 to provide all students with the best possible education. And whereas, the Bremen High School District 228 Board of Education sets the direction for our schools by envisioning the educational future of our students. And whereas, school administrators implement the policies and programs that emanate from that vision for our school community. And whereas, teachers take those policies and programs into the classroom to instill a lifelong love of learning in their students, and whereas the support staff provides the day-to-day clerical and human services that enable teachers and administrators to do their job, and whereas all of these dedicated professionals seek the best learning environment to the end that all children will be successful in school and no child will be left behind. Now therefore be it resolved that the Board of Education of Bremen Community High School District 228 proclaims the successful completion of another school year and thanks our current and retiring staff members for their dedicated service to our children.
So moved.
Moved by Mrs. Gleason,
Second.
second by Mrs. Bresler. Discussion?
I just wanted to state that all the graduations were wonderful and outstanding, and thank you for all your hard work and success in this school year, especially with all of those who were able to walk around across the stage. That's a great accomplishment. And not only, I feel that when the students walk across the stage, we walk with them.
Anybody else? Just a word, I've mentioned it to Dr. Kendall several times within the past couple of months. I thought we had a much, much better year compared to last year. And I'm really proud of the administrators and teachers for all their effort, and we really do appreciate it. So thank you. Okay, roll call.
Mrs. Gleason? Aye. Mrs. Wrestler? Aye. Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
Mrs. Jones?
Aye.
Mrs. Campworth, aye. Ms. Stearns?
Aye.
Mr. Canning?
Aye. Personnel, Mr. Gaggins.
818 is personnel. Under resignations, Lily Trent Holman. Under leaves, Katie Crow Catrano and Juana Castillo. Under change in position, Lisa Giulio Bizik, Teresa Thormeyer, and Deborah Strahm. Under employment, Andrew French, Thomas Pietrowski, Caitlin Maravich, Scott Priestman, Lourdes Ramirez, Christina Bodica, Brittany Gezi, Susan Hassan, Lisa Garza, Sandra Lezentine, Michael Jevons, Heather Kajewski, and Angela Cordes. Personnel Committee met on June 8th. They reviewed the many certificated and support staff items on the agenda, and these are now being presented to the full board for approval.
Looking for a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mrs. Stearns, second by Mr. Johnson. Any discussion? No discussion. Mrs. Camworth, roll call.
Ms. Stearns?
Aye.
Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
Mrs. Gleason?
Aye.
Mrs. Jones?
Aye.
Mrs. Campbell? Aye. Mrs. Wrestler?
Aye.
Mr. Canning?
Aye. Okay, item 9, closed session to consider information regarding negotiations. At this time, I'd be looking for a motion to move to closed session.
So moved.
Moved by Mrs.
Second.
Jones, second by Mrs. Gleason. Discussion, vote please.
Mrs. Jones?
Aye.
Mrs. Gleason? Aye. Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
Mrs. Campworth, aye. Mrs. Wrestler?
Aye.
Ms. Stearns?
Aye.
Mr. Canning?
Aye.
So I gotta have another Ms. Stearns.
Ms. Stearns. Roll call please.
All right, Mrs. Gleason? Aye. Ms. Stearns?
Aye.
Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
Mrs. Jones?
Aye.
Mrs. Campworth, aye. Mrs. Wrestler? Mrs. Wrestler?
I'm sorry, aye.
Mr. Canning?
Aye. Okay, announcements, Personnel Committee, Monday, July 13th, 6:30 at the Ad Center. Finance Committee, Monday, July 13th, 7 p.m. at the Ad Center. Teaching and Learning, Tuesday, July 14th at 7 p.m. at the Ad Center. And our next board meeting will be at Hillcrest High School on July 21st at 7 p.m. I'd be looking for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned.